I'm Natalie Sachs Erricsson, and I'm a clinical psychologist in the Department of Psychology at Florida State University. My special area is in epidemiological psychiatry, looking at health and mental health of older adults.
I'm Dawn Carr. I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Sociology at Florida State University and a faculty associate at the Pepper Institute on Aging and Public Policy. And my area of expertise is in aging and social connectedness. Most of my work has focused a lot on trying to understand ways that we can help older adults age better. Trying to better understand what are the factors that we can do to really bolster the well-being of older people, but particularly with respect to things such as sort of engaging with other people in ways that have health benefits.
In addition to my work in psychology and gerontology, I've had a passion for animals, and particularly dogs. And I recently saw a call for a grant by the Waltham Institute in conjunction with GSA, Gerontological Society of America, to support research on the human-animal interaction in older adults.
And so we discovered that the Health and Retirement Study, which is a longitudinal study of older adults who are over the age of 50, in 2012 they collected data on their human-animal interaction. We were able to discover that we could look longitudinally at the sort of impact of how having an animal impacts the lives of older adults, particularly older adults who are vulnerable. A lot of my interest is in looking at vulnerable older adults and seeing what we can do to help offset some of the risks that they face. And in this case, I've been particularly concerned about things like loneliness and social isolation. And so it seemed to make quite a bit of sense that we could explore the degree to which older adults who are vulnerable are impacted by the lives, sharing their lives with pets.
It's rare for epidemiological data to have such a rich data source as was put in this 2012 wave of the survey.
It's really unique in the sense that it's been collected since 1992 and has some of the richest it's the richest data set I think we have on older adults. We have lots of information about the lives of these people, and so being able to intersect that information with their interactions with pets.
And when we started thinking about this project, we came to realize that there may be differences in people who choose to have animals and people who don't choose to have animals. And possibly in some areas, someone who's lonely, maybe sad, maybe even have a depression, may be the person who goes out and gets an animal to help deal with that. And so if we just look at cross-sectional studies and we look at differences, we might make the mistake of thinking, oh, here are people who have dogs and they seem to have more sadness than people without dogs. But that might be because of what we call selection. So one of the first things that we want to really understand with this data set is what are those selection factors? What are factors that may make research difficult because people sort themselves into dog owners and non-dog owners, or cat owners and non-cat owners? I'm really interested in people who go through sort of life crises. So most people may be going along doing fine, but then something happens where they're very stressed, and that's where a companion animal may make the biggest difference. And what we thought about together were things like widowhood, divorce, health problem in older age, and these are all events that happen more often among older adults. The first thing we really want to come to understand are selection factors. Who adopts an animal, a companion animal, who doesn't? At baseline, we might look and say, oh, people who have dogs, they're more depressed than people without dogs. But that might be because people who are having some sort of difficulty, loneliness, may seek out some solutions like having a companion animal. So that's the first thing we want to sort out, is something we call in science selection factors. And we want to identify those selection factors so that researchers in the future can know what kind of baseline differences do they need to sort of control for.
And then after that, we're going to look at how these selection factors come into play during these major life crises like widowhood, where older people are facing really difficult circumstances. So oftentimes when we face major life events, difficult life events, we're especially at risk of having bad things happen to us, especially when you're cut off from other people. So loneliness is a particularly big concern because loneliness is associated with all kinds of negative health effects. And so persistent loneliness, people who are socially isolated and then have bad things happen, they have a higher risk of having significant decline following a major life event. And so things that buffer those negative effects are really important. And so our next step is to try to really understand how pets can come into play and potentially provide an important buffer to these difficult circumstances.
We also want to look at the interplay between having a companion animal and the person's social network. I'm curious whether people who are low in social integration, social connectedness, whether they benefit more than people who are socially connected and go through a crisis. We want to identify people who, right before Wave 2012, went through a serious crisis, like widowhood or retirement or significant health problem, and then look at their social functioning and then follow them through to 2014.
If somebody had a really rich group of friends and social supports in their life and they face a difficult life event, they might have kind of a really good group of support to kind of help them manage that difficult event. And a pet might be beneficial, but not in exactly the same way as someone who doesn't have that. So having maybe a deficit in social connections, having a bad thing happen really places us at high risk of not really being able to recover from these difficult circumstances in later life. So those groups of people, if they have a pet, that pet might be especially important for helping them be okay. So it's possible that pets, you could imagine that they would have a different impact in different people's lives. So we're really excited to see how those social networks come into play.
And there's at least two possible mechanisms for that social connectedness. One is the relationship with the animal itself, which has been shown to increase oxytocin and lower blood pressure. And another is that there's a lot of research showing a lot of incidental interactions with other people through your pet, through walking, meeting other people. And so there are two ways that companion animals, at least two ways, can increase social connectivity.
All pets are the same, or if there's a
Oh, that's a
differentiation
good
between
question.
like a
Yeah.
dog or a cat or a fish or a
Well,
cricket?
Yeah, and we should probably clarify that we're focusing on dogs and cats in this particular study, and that's largely because, you can imagine a pet that you can hold and touch and interact with is probably quite different than, for instance, a fish.
Now, when it comes to service animals and emotional support animals, I've spent a lot of time with people who have service dogs because I volunteer for Paws with a Cause, and they train service dogs for people with disabilities. And people who have a service animal talk about that relationship being extremely special. And they actually get upset if you refer to their service dog as a pet. It's not a pet. This is more than a pet. And you can't really understand if you're not in that situation where your life depends on your interpersonal relationship with that animal. In looking at the benefits, as Waltham Institute is doing, I think they also keep in mind that there's the downside too, and that we need to also balance.
Balance out the costs and benefits.
Yes. Both Dawn and I really come from areas outside of human-animal interaction, and there are some incredible programs throughout the country studying HAI, but I think that people in other areas like epidemiological psychiatry and gerontology, social connectedness, that it's very important for them to start thinking about how to contribute to this literature within their own science, because I think that's where a lot more wealth of information can come. And I would invite them to look at Waltham Institute website and see what small grants are available that might excite them, and that they could add on or piggyback to the research they're already doing on older adults. We just found out that GSA and the Waltham Institute has granted our research application, which will fund this research for the next 2 years, and we're absolutely
Super
thrilled.
excited. We really want to thank the Waltham Institute for funding this. We're really excited.
And we really are so excited to bring our scientific backgrounds to this very important area of human-animal interaction
Yeah.
for older adults.